How many books did you read last year? Was it as many as you wanted to? I did not read as many books as I wanted to, which is why this year I am adding reading to my New Year's resolutions. This is partially because I love reading, and I want to get through my to-be-read pile of books, and it's partially because I know the more I read, the better author I will become. So today I want to share reading resolutions, how to use reading to improve your writing. Before you create reading resolutions, you need to understand how much time you actually have to devote to your reading. Also, if your goal for your reading is to help your writing, you need to pick books specifically to improve your writing, and by this I don't just mean writing craft books. That's what we're going to talk about today. If you hang on until the end of this video, I'll share with you 13 writing craft books I recommend as an editor and my favorite writing podcast. This is Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, award-winning author, editor, and creative writing instructor. Let's start with, how much time do you have to read? For most people, reading is something we enjoy, and it's a form of entertainment. That means it's competing with all the other entertainment options we have, especially screens. So if you want to read more, you're going to have to give up some of your Netflix binging, video game playing, and social media scrolling time. I'm not saying that you have to give up all of it, but that is most likely where you're going to find more time to read. As an added bonus, having less screen time right before bed might help save your eyes and improve your sleep. But before you decide to give up TV or video games altogether, take a moment and be realistic with yourself. You enjoy those other things. That's why you devote some of your time to them. You don't have to give them up completely in order to read more. Take a look at how much time you spend watching TV every evening. Could you give up an hour or two in order to read more? Look for areas where you will realistically cut back on that time in order to read more. If you set lofty reading goals and you know you're not going to quit playing video games, you're not going to stop watching TV, and you try and find time other places, it's not going to be as effective as if you realistically ask yourself, how much time can I and will I devote to reading? That will let you know how many books you could realistically read this year. You also need to pay attention to how quickly you read. There is no too fast, too slow, the right amount. This is just how fast do you read when you're reading for pleasure. Then you can look at how much time you have, how fast you read, and do the math to figure out roughly how many books you could read this year. I know how fast I read. My tentative reading goal for the new year is to finish one book a week. For my larger books, it's going to be one book every 2 weeks. That's because I know how much time I'm willing to give up to devote to that and how fast I read. So you need to do those calculations for yourself. Next, I want to talk about how to pick books to enjoy and improve your writing. Now it's time for the fun part. You know how many books you can read this year, so now you get to pick them out. I recommend picking books from each of these categories if a part of your reading goal is to improve your writing skills. Here are those categories. A book in the genre you write. A book outside the genre you write. A bestseller published within the last 2 years that's in your genre. A poetry book. A fiction book. A nonfiction book. A book about the craft of writing. A recent book on publishing or marketing for authors. A book by a traditionally published author. A book by a self-published author. And a book for research. That might seem like a long list, but if you're not going to read many books this year, you can combine some of these. For example, if you write science fiction, reading a book of poetry could count for a book outside your genre, a traditionally published book, and a poetry book. Or, if you're like me and you're planning to read a book every week, you might intentionally not combine these categories in order to read more like a writer. This list of books is designed to both improve your writing skills and to increase your knowledge of the publishing industry. You want to read modern books written in your genre. That means books that were published in the last 5 years or so, and you want to read recent bestsellers because this is going to give you the best understanding of what is selling now in publishing and how to write a book for modern readers, not a book for readers from a century ago. You also want to read books outside your genre because each genre of writing is really a master of something. Romance authors are amazing at romance, love stories, and happily ever afters. Poetry authors are masters of imagery and emotion. So if there is a piece of your writing that you want to improve, choose a genre that is a master of that thing. Or you might choose a genre that is adjacent to yours and is going to improve your writing in that way. For example, a large component of urban fantasy is mystery. So if you want to get better at the mystery piece of writing urban fantasy, read a cozy mystery, a thriller, something along those lines, and pay specific attention to how the author is crafting that mystery. When are they dropping hints? When are they dropping red herrings? When did you figure out who did it? You can, of course, learn writing techniques from writing craft books too, which is why I recommend reading some of those. And you can learn about the publishing industry by reading books about publishing and marketing, which is why I recommend some of those. I will say, when you're picking books about publishing and marketing, make sure you're picking ones that were released recently. If it was released 10 years ago, it is definitely way outdated. That is not going to be the way that things work now. Even if they're talking about how you go about pitching agents and publishers, that is different than it was 10 years ago. And if you're going to be looking at writing craft books, know where you are in your writing journey. When I first read On Writing by Stephen King, I was in my last semester of my MFA program in creative writing. I had heard everything he had to say already, so it didn't have any sort of impact on me. However, the general writing craft book Bird by Anne Lamott is something I still turn to when I need to remind myself to break my writing into chunks or that everybody writes a shitty first draft. So pick books that meet you where you are. If you're looking for a more advanced craft book, look for one that is on a specific aspect of writing, such as Write Characters Readers Won't Forget by Stant Latourie. Then, if you are writing about something that is outside your area of expertise, reading a book specifically to gain more knowledge in that area can be really useful. It's a form of research for your writing. So if your main character is a plumber, maybe you're going to read Plumbing for Dummies. Maybe you're going to read a memoir by a plumber about his experience doing that. So pick stories that are going to help you increase your knowledge bases. So again, this list of books to read is designed both to help you improve as an author and to help you better keep up with the changes in the publishing industry. Next, I want to share how to read like a writer. If you want to read specifically to improve your writing, you need to pay attention to the writing aspect of whatever you're reading. This can be particularly challenging because good writing disappears. That means you're going to have to consciously pay attention to the writing. How I recommend you do this is the next time you find yourself reading something that you can't put down, you're reading well into the night, or the next time you're excited to get off of work to get back to your book, mark that spot in your book. Then come back and analyze it. Ask yourself why you were so drawn in. How did the author do that? Was it the characters that they were just so interesting? How did they develop them in that way? Was it the sequence of events in the plot? Was the pacing just right so that it wasn't too fast, but you were constantly engaged? How did they create that pacing? How much time did they spend on each scene to do that? How were they creating the tension that was driving the story? What was at stake for the characters? What was motivating them in those moments? Look at these pieces of the book to see how you can use those techniques in your own writing. I find this easier to do after I've read the book. So I will mark these sections with a bit of scrap paper, an extra bookmark. I'll just remember the page number, and I will come back and do that analysis later. I'm too invested in the story to stop and do that then. Also, I like to take a big picture look at the book and say, okay, did this whole book keep me invested in that way? Or was I not invested until page 50? Well, what happened then that made me so invested for the rest of the story? Or did that lessen as time went on? Okay, well, why did that lessen for me? So I like to take a look at the big picture as well as those individual sections that were doing really well. Of course, you do also need to pay attention to bad writing, to things that you didn't like, and ask yourself why you didn't like them, how you can avoid it in your own writing. I will say that is easier. It's always easier to notice the negative than it is to notice the positive. And noticing what's not working is going to show you what not to do. It's not going to teach you what you should do, which is why it's so important to pay attention to what is working as well. So that's how you can read like a writer and use reading to improve your writing. Finally, I want to share an editor and author's thoughts on reading for your writing. Some authors don't like to read when they're invested in their writing because they're afraid that whatever they're reading will taint what they're writing. If this is you, read something that is completely unrelated to what you are working on at that time. If you're working on a fiction book that is set in the 1850s, read a book about the modern publishing industry. That is most likely not going to influence your writing in the way that you're worried about. Another common thing I hear is authors will say, I don't have time to read if I want to write. While this is valid for some people, we all go through periods in our life where we just don't have time to do everything we want. This is more often than not an excuse to not have to read. And the problem with that is you're not going to keep up with the publishing industry if you're not reading what's currently popular. So just know that that is a choice and a trade-off that you are making. Because what was popular 5 years ago is not what's popular now. And if you especially want to land a traditional publisher, you need to know what is trending now so that you can anticipate what will be trending by the time your book comes out. I can always tell when a fantasy author fell in love with the fantasy genre by reading books published in the 80s or 90s, because they will write in this outdated, really distant feeling, omniscient point of view that modern fantasy readers just don't want. So you don't want to be old-fashioned in a negative way. I have seen modern fantasy authors who revive that sort of omniscient point of view and do something to make it interesting for modern readers, but they know to do that because they've been paying attention in the publishing world. Similarly, I can tell a young adult author who doesn't understand what young adult readers actually want by the voice and the pace of their books. Modern young adult books are fast-paced. If you don't have that pace going, you're not going to be attracting modern young adult readers. And modern young adult characters are snarky and they're steeped in that teenage perspective. If you don't understand that modern teenage perspective, no one is going to want to read your YA book. That's why you need to keep up with what is being published now and what is popular now, for whatever your genre is. So you're not only paying attention to, are vampires trending now? You're paying attention to what writing techniques are trending. Is first person in or omniscient? Is young adult voice snarky right now or is it sweet? You need to be paying attention to these things if you want to be a successful author with lots of readers. The easiest way to do that is to read books. And finally, all authors want to be read. That is their ultimate dream. By reading books, you're fulfilling that dream for someone else. That's just good karma to put out into the universe when it comes to your own writing. So, what books do you plan to read this year? Share some of them in the comments below. Right now, I'm finishing up a nonfiction book, and I'm going to reward myself for slogging through it because it's been difficult by reading the next book in L.R. Braden's Magic Smith series. For more tips on how to read like a writer and other aspects of writing, subscribe to Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers. because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, award-winning author, editor, and creative writing instructor. To find out more about me, go to ignitedinkwriting.com. That's where you will find my editing and speaking services, as well as the written version of this video. There you will also find my list of 13 writing craft books I think every author should at least skim through. And if you want to check out my writing to see if maybe you want to add it to your list this year, go to caitlinburvey.com. There you will find When Magic Calls, a collection of modern fairy tales, as well as my other published work. And now it's your turn to figure out when you actually have time to read. Select books specifically to improve your writing, and pay attention when you're reading those books to ignite your ink.